Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we are going over players that I would be concerned about in your fantasy football playoffs. We're going to talk about it more in depth here. These are either players that I believe are going to start trending downwards very shortly. They have tough playoff schedules. You're going to see what I mean once we get into it. But we're going to start it off today with Raheem Mostert. Now, I know he just went for 21 fantasy points in week number 12, but I think there is much more to the story here that we are just not seeing from a stats point of view. First of all, he broke a huge run late in the game. I think it was a 40-yard touchdown run, which boosted his points by 10, all right, that he would have finished with. Since week 7, we've seen a major production dip here, even when De'Von Achane is out. And now De'Von Achane is returning in week 13, at least we hope so, once again from that knee injury, assuming that he stays healthy. Of course, that takes away from Raheem Mostert's production potential. Along with that, Jeff Wilson Jr. actually played great in that game against the New York Jets, so I'm sure they're going to try to manufacture more touches for him as well. So now you have 3 capable running backs in this backfield ready to go at all times, any point in the game. And the playoff schedule is just not that good other than playing against the New York Jets in week 15. But leading up to the playoffs, they get 2 more favorable matchups against the Washington Commanders and the Tennessee Titans. So I would not be surprised whatsoever if Raheem Mostert plays well in those games. But the other 2 playoff games that they get in week 16 and 17 are against the Cowboys and the Ravens. 2 lockdown defenses against the run most weeks. We just saw Zach Charbonnet play, he played all right against the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, but it wasn't an amazing performance and his yards per carry was not good. So we just cannot count on that type of volume coming in for Raheem Mostert. When you have 2 more capable running backs on your team, Raheem Mostert in that same situation that we saw Charbonnet in, I think he does score, more fantasy points than him, but we're in a situation where Raheem Mostert is probably going to get around 10 carries if we're lucky. With 3 running backs in the rotation, I am not feeling good about that. Then we move on to Derrick Henry. Henry's coming off a 2-touchdown performance against one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, if not the worst, in the Carolina Panthers. He does get another fairly simple matchup this week against the Indianapolis Colts, but after that, his schedule is pretty mediocre to me, and the games that he is playing in, the opponents in these matchups, the Titans that is, they can easily find themselves down in these games, and that's a thing I hate about Derrick Henry, is that he is heavily dependent on game script, unless he breaks a long touchdown. Weeks 10 and 11, the game script was flipped negative from the very beginning. They couldn't get him involved at all. He scored 3 and 5.4 PPR fantasy points in those games. That's not going to fly in your fantasy football championship. Let me tell you right now, if you score 3 or 5.4 fantasy points and it's your championship game, you better hope to God somebody else drops a 30 burger or you are screwed. You're losing that championship and it's going to be Derrick Henry's fault. After the Colts game, they get the Miami Dolphins, which is a game that can easily get out of hand early. The Texans with CJ Stroud, they are killing it as of late. Can get away early. Seattle Seahawks just put up 35 points against the Dallas Cowboys. That can get away early, and then once again, the Houston Texans to finish it off. Another thing I don't love, especially in PPR leagues with Derrick Henry, is he's good for about 1 to 2 catches per game. So that better be a long screen pass touchdown if you're going to get really a lot of value out of him in the PPR game. That is what Tyjae Spears' role is. That's basically why he's there, to catch more passes than Derrick Henry. That's what we expected. This isn't past year's Derrick Henry as well. He's not going to get that volume every single game. Sure, every now and again he gets 15, 20 carries, but it's not the Derrick Henry that's getting fed the ball 25, 30 times some games. So you can't really count on that happening on a gamely basis. Even for the rest of the season, I wouldn't count on that happening. So that's why he's not on my start list for my fantasy football playoffs. Not feeling too great about that. Then we got Saquon Barkley, and do not get this twisted at all. I love Saquon as an NFL player. I think he's great. The Giants are my real issue here. How can you trust a team that can drop a dud at any point in time? Although I know Tommy DeVito has been playing better, I got to give him a little bit of props. I don't think it really matters for Saquon's value. I'm not comfortable starting him. I'm actually not comfortable starting anybody on this Giants football team right now. I'll tell you that much. Saquon dropped a 30-point game against the Commanders in Week 11, but other than that, he really hasn't gotten anything going like we expected from him, and it's not completely his fault, like I was saying. It's the Giants team overall. But if we take a look at this playoff schedule, they go against the Saints, the Eagles, and the Los Angeles Rams. Those games, you can't be sure if the Giants are going to put up, a lot of points, if any points at all. This could be, blowout type games where Saquon's really not involved. He better be involved in the passing game, though. If that happens, Saquon needs to be involved in the passing game if they're going to have a comeback type of effort. Because if not, he's not going to be doing much. He's not going to be scoring much for your fantasy teams, and it could hurt you in the long run. Would I be sitting Saquon, though? That's another question. I don't know about that. I don't know if I could if you have the guts to sit Saquon, if you have better options, it's one thing, but if you have the guts to sit Saquon and play somebody like Keaton Mitchell, perhaps, then you're crazy. Unless, no, stop it. Anyway, moving on. Kenneth Walker. Moving on to Kenneth Walker here. I am not a big fan of this situation unfolding in Seattle at running back. I do have to say, after watching that Thursday night football game against the Dallas Cowboys, Charbonnet exited early with a knee injury. We don't know further information. I'm recording this video on Thursday night, and I'm going to release it Friday afternoon at some point. So I'm not going to probably get information to update you on Charbonnet by the time this video is released. Just keep an eye on that situation, though. If Charbonnet does come back, he's been getting more and more and more playing time, even when Walker wasn't injured. Now you have to worry about him coming back and either being limited or re-injuring that oblique injury once Walker does return. Also, the schedule the rest of the way is brutal, right? They get the San Francisco 49ers, the Philadelphia Eagles, Tennessee Titans, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one of the hardest schedules in the entire league for the playoffs, and there are just a ton of better options out there, in my opinion. And if you got by easily without Kenneth Walker in your lineup, I wouldn't be rushing him into your lineup the first week that he comes back, especially if that's week 15, the first week of your fantasy playoffs, and you need that must-win game. I don't know if I'd be shoving him in your lineup. Another guy that I wouldn't be shoving in your lineup is Aaron Jones. This dude cannot get fully healthy at all this season. He's scored less than 10 points in 5 out of 7 games that he's played in due to this injury, which absolutely sucks for fantasy owners. I've seen a couple leagues that I'm in, couple random leagues that I'm in, they're dropping Aaron Jones. They just don't trust him at all, and I don't blame him. At this point, I think it's just best to plop him on your bench until further notice. I don't know if I'd really drop him at this point, but how can you really feel confident right now? The problem is that also, A.J. Dillon has not been good. If you picked up A.J. Dillon as a backup, as a handcuff option in the beginning of the season, you're kind of stuck in this backfield. All right, every year we hear the same crap about how A.J. Dillon is going to be, amazing once Aaron Jones leaves the Packers. Where is it? Where is it? It should be happening. We're not seeing it. I don't know. I don't know if he has it in him at this point in time. If you're interested in playing either of these guys, though, playoff schedule is not good either. They go against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have a good run defense. Carolina Panthers, worst run defense in the league, so maybe you could play one of them on that week. Then the Minnesota Vikings to finish it off, not a good matchup to end your fantasy football playoffs. Now we're moving on to James Conner, and then we got one more running back. Then we'll get into the wide receivers here. James Conner, right now the Cardinals cannot get ahead in any of these games, which is absolutely destroying James Conner's value on a weekly basis. It was looking extremely promising. I actually started him last week against the Rams. I thought he was going to have a better game. It was looking so promising on the first drive of the game. I think he had 4 or 5 fantasy points in the first drive of the game. All right, we're thinking, here we go. Finally, James Conner is back. But then after that, he barely got any action. He finished the game with 6 carries for 27 yards, 4 catches for 5 yards. I can't lie. I traded for him, okay, in the middle of the season because I thought he was going to come back and play like he was in the beginning of the year. It just didn't happen. And the pass catchers on this team are just so much more valuable than the running backs, and the schedule for the playoffs just favors the wide receivers so much more than James Conner. Also, Kyler Murray is going to be scooting his way in and out of the end zone, here and there. That's what James Conner was thriving as, was a goal line rusher. I think this past week they got on the goal line. They just didn't even use him. They used Kyler Murray as a little sneak play around the corner. Stop it. Give the ball to James Conner 3 times. Let him get in the end zone. Let him get going, okay? Playoff schedule, as we were just talking about, not favorable for running backs. It's actually the toughest in the entire league. San Francisco 49ers, the Chicago Bears, who have surprisingly held teams to the lowest amount of rushing yards, I believe, over the past couple of weeks at least. So they're coming on strong as a defense. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, who are ranking first the entire season against running backs. All right, like I said, has to be the toughest schedule out of any running back, so I'm not feeling good about James Conner. I am, though, feeling great about the pass catchers. Next, we're going to move on to Khalil Herbert. I was feeling pretty good about Khalil Herbert heading into that Monday night game against the Minnesota Vikings in Week 12. Since Dante Foreman was out, I was thinking, okay, he's going to step up and be that #1 guy like he was before getting injured. But it turns out, after all those weeks of teasing Roschon Johnson, we talked about Roschon Johnson on this channel so many times. This is his week. He's going to break out here. He's getting more touches, blah, blah, blah. He finally gets more touches in Week 12. Of course he does. Go figure. Now we're in a position where we don't know who's going to be the main guy. When Foreman returns, will he lead the backfield? Is Herbert and Johnson going to split the touches as running back #2? Is Roschon emerging as the #1 running back finally? Is that just a fluky game for Khalil Herbert? We do not know. We're going to have to wait until Week 14 to see, because they have a bye week in Week 13. Then the playoff schedule for the Bears isn't the worst, but they do have 2 tougher matchups against the Browns and the Falcons, while they get a breather in the middle against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if I feel comfortable starting any of these guys just yet. I definitely have to get a feel for the situation first. Now we're going to move on to the wide receivers here. I only got 4. I might have 5 for you here, but there's not many wide receivers that I feel too bad about starting, but there are a couple on the decline or whatever the situation is bad. So Adam Thielen is who we're starting with. If we're being honest, this was always bound to happen. Right? Thielen started off the year scorching hot, scoring almost every single game, seeing an unbelievable target share, especially for a 30-plus-year-old receiver. Before Week 7, the bye week, he had just 1 game in single-digit fantasy points. After the bye week, he hasn't scored at all, and he's had his highest scoring game be 15.4 PPR fantasy points. And while he's still definitely serviceable as a flex option in my eyes at best right now, I don't love playing him. This next week, they play against the Tampa Bay Bucks. I can definitely see him having a good game in that game, because they love to give up a ton of passing yards. You saw what CJ Stroud did earlier on in the season, but after that, they get the Saints, Falcons, Packers, and the Jaguars, who are all better defenses against the pass and can cause problems for Bryce Young. Maybe firing Frank Reich was, the move they needed to make, but I'm not completely sold on the situation just yet. I think Bryce Young might need another year or two of development before we really see anything crazy come from this offense and see any reliable options come from it. But I do have to give a shout out to Adam Thielen. He has been absolutely killing it this year, and nobody thought he would be here. Okay, it's very impressive that he's even at this point. I believe he's still a top 15 wide receiver as we speak. Now we're going to move on to Jamarr Chase and T. Higgins. I guess I'll throw him on here as well, because he should be back for the fantasy playoffs. I debated putting Chase on here or leaving him off, because the situation here is very risky. But if you're going to go for a championship, I don't know if you can pull a trigger, taking Jamarr out, putting him in. That's going to be up to you guys. I feel really bad for Chase, because without Joe Burrow on this offense, it's just not nearly as good. Next year, Joe Burrow is going to be 100%. Jamarr Chase is going to be back. T. Higgins might not even be on the team, but Jamarr Chase for sure is going to be back next year. You can guarantee that. But as of right now, Jake Browning, I'm not confident in this situation. Even without T. Higgins playing, the past 2 games, Jamarr Chase has only scored 9.2 and 12.1 PPR fantasy points. And in Week 11 against the Ravens, he would have finished with like 2 fantasy points if he didn't catch a garbage time touchdown. Now, once T. Higgins does return to this lineup, I don't know if it really diminishes Jamarr Chase's value whatsoever, because it's already, taken such a dip since Burrow was out. I think it actually might help him, taking some coverage off him. The playoff schedule for them consists of the Vikings, who have been tough lately, the Steelers, who are playing better defense, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been playing much better defense than expected up to this point in the season. Not the best matchups at all. So decide what you want to do with Jamarr Chase. T. Higgins, I don't know if I'm playing him. There's some weeks where T. Higgins says he's going to play and he doesn't even play. He screwed me last year doing that. Don't make that mistake in your fantasy playoffs. I'll just say that right now. Then we got Chris Godwin. At the beginning of this season, I really thought that Godwin was still going to have his role that he had with Tom Brady for the past couple of years, being the safety blanket, getting double-digit targets most games. That role has completely flipped on its head to Mike Evans. Mike Evans gets all the targets. Mike Evans gets all the deep balls. Mike Evans gets all the touchdowns. He gets all the looks. Okay, Godwin has just 1 touchdown this season, along with just 2 games in double-digit targets. And over the last 4 games, he hasn't even broke 10 PPR fantasy points. In the playoffs, they end up going against the Packers, the Jaguars, and the Saints. There's still a bit of time for Godwin to turn it around, but if there's anybody that I am playing in this offense right now at the wide receiver position, it's got to be Mike Evans. He's just getting so many more valuable looks than Godwin right now, and it's not even close. And last but not least, we have Jordan Addison. This one might be a little bit controversial here, but Jordan Addison is suffering heavily from not having Kirk Cousins anymore. He has been on the decline since that 31-point game that he dropped. In fact, it's not only Addison that's been struggling, it's been the entire team, except TJ Hawkinson is still one of the best tight ends in football, so he's still getting involved. My problem here is that once Justin Jefferson comes off IR in week 14, what is that going to do for Jordan Addison? Is it going to be a situation where Justin Jefferson gets fed the ball 12, 14 times a game? Hawkinson sees about 10 targets, and then that's going to leave very little room for Jordan Addison to work with. Now, do I think that's going to be the target share every single game? No, of course not. It's going to fluctuate. Maybe Jefferson gets 10 targets, Hawkinson gets 7, 8, and then Jordan Addison gets 8 certain weeks, and it's going to be balanced. But it's not going to be balanced like that every single week. The playoff schedule isn't terrible for the Vikings, by the way. They play the Bengals, the Lions, and the Packers. So I'd say that the Bengals and the Lions at least are pretty favorable matchups for wide receivers. Hopefully I'm going to be proved wrong by Joshua Dobbs. He struggled. He threw 4 interceptions against the Bears last Monday night. That was brutal. Now they have their bye week, and it's a situation where we don't even know if he's going to have a job after the bye week. That's how brutal that performance was. Hopefully they give him at least one more chance. I think he's earned it. Give him one more chance to prove that he should be the quarterback here and see what he can do. Because I don't think Jaren Hall or Nick Mullins is going to do much better, if I'm being totally honest with you. And last but not least, a couple comments were asking me about best defenses to play in the playoffs. And I went through, I couldn't really find too many options that were great. I will say the Chiefs had a great looking schedule. I believe it was the Bengals, Raiders, and the Patriots. I believe that's who the Kansas City Chiefs played in the playoffs. But I would look for a streaming option who is playing, a backup quarterback like the Bengals. Get somebody who's playing the Bengals. Get somebody who's playing the Jets. Get the defense that is playing the Patriots or the Giants. Any one of those teams right there, those 5 teams, if you can secure a team that plays one of those guys in the playoffs. I know the Dolphins, they play the Jets in the playoffs. I know the Browns play the Jets in the playoffs. I know the Broncos play the Patriots in the playoffs. Situations like that can prove so beneficial to you in the playoffs. And if you have roster spots to, dispose of at the moment and you're guaranteed to make the playoffs, go out and pick them up right now. I think the Eagles play the Giants in the playoffs as well. Go out and pick those defenses up right now when nobody is even looking for them. Stash them and play them in your playoffs if you are still alive. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, as always, drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you are new, I will catch you in or after week 13. So good luck. Hopefully you guys win your matchups, and I will see you next week. Have a good one. Peace.